Today we're going to be learning about logos, ethos, and pathos. These are collectively called the elements of persuasion. So these are very important because when you analyze persuasive texts, argumentative papers, they're obviously what the author is using to try to get you to agree with his or her argument. But you probably don't recognize that they're also present in a lot of other things too. Literally, what we're going to be using to try to understand most of this, to see some clear examples, is one of the most common forms of persuasion: advertisement. The first one that we'll talk about is logos. Logos is a fancy Greek word, like all of these words, that means logic. So essentially when we talk about logos as an element of persuasion, we're talking about the author's use of logic, or evidence, reasoning, and conclusions. Those are the three basic things that you're going to be looking for whenever you look for evidence of logos. What evidence does the author present? What is the reasoning? Essentially, how does he connect the pieces of evidence that he presents? And what his conclusions actually are based on that. When you see someone giving good evidence, making good connections, making good reasoning, and coming to good conclusions, ones that make sense to you, then we would say that they're using logos effectively. So one of the examples that you guys might see in the world of advertising would be one like this one. So this Powerade advertisement is claiming that this drink replaces 4 of the main electrolytes that you use and replaces them in the same ratio that you would lose when you sweat. This is a good example of logos right here, because we might naturally make the connection here. If we lose something through sweat, we want to replace it. And likewise, you might see the connection to the ratio here. If I lose a ratio of 1 part potassium to 2 parts whatever the other things are, then I want to replace them in that exact same ratio as well. This is appealing to our sense of reason and logic right here. By far the most broad category that you will see of fall under logos is just the use of actual hard evidence, not simply a claim or an opinion or a unsubstantiated assertion, but something that actually is factually observable. That would be the main juice of someone's logos in their art. The next of the elements is pathos, which is Greek for passion. So this is the element that talks about the emotion that's present in someone's writing, and most especially the appeal to the reader's emotions. So it's not just the same thing as, for instance, the tone with which you're speaking, though that can play an important role in it. Pathos is also essentially the way that you're trying to make the audience feel. What emotion are you appealing to in their own lives? So there are times in which I might speak with a particularly angry tone of voice, using my own emotion, because I'm trying to connect to the anger of my audience. But that's not always the case. Sometimes I might be speaking very lovely, without any sort of emotion in my voice, but I am still trying to appeal, trying to make my audience feel a particular emotion that I'm not showing myself. An example of pathos that you might be able to see here, and in this advertisement right here, this one right here is from an anti-smoking group. And as you might be able to tell from the imagery right here of the gun, along with the many facts, the many dangers of smoking that this is putting right here, this is trying to appeal to the audience's sense of fear. We want the audience to see this, and we want them to feel the dangers, the risks, the overall fear that if they start smoking, then many bad things will happen to them. The last element of persuasion is ethos, and this one I think is the most tricky to get at first, but it'll come to you guys. Ethos means authority. So what basically this one is all about is making yourself an authoritative voice, or making sure that the audience trusts you or trusts the expertise of your sources. So essentially, when you are listening and deciding on changing your behavior or making a decision, you want to know that anyone who's giving you advice knows what they're talking about. That's what this element really is all about. So basically, when someone is using expert language or clearly showing that they have qualifications, someone's a doctor, someone went to school for this, that sort of stuff, then that is a use of ethos. Likewise, using sources or facts that come from a trustworthy source is another way that ethos is used. There's also a dimension of ethos that has to do with the shared values that people have. So appealing to someone's value that someone would have that you also share or that you think is widely shared in society is another use of ethos. For instance, appealing to patriotism is very, very common. Many people assume that that value is widely shared, and we tend to trust people who have the same values as us. So appealing to patriotism might be something that you see as well as a sort of. Now, though, by far the easiest way that you see this in advertisements is recommendations. So you might see, for instance, the classic Sensodyne toothpaste advertisements where 9 out of 10 dentists agree that this is the best toothpaste, whatever it might be. So that's a classic. You're trying to convince people that the majority of dentists, the vast majority, all come together as a very authoritative voice and say, this is the best toothpaste. Likewise, you might see things like celebrity endorsements as a form of ethos in these advertisements. Lots of different options for that. And of course, advertisements love appealing to the values that they think that you share with them. You'll see all kinds of things that advertise based on, again, patriotism, or based on a love of independence, or a love of adventure, or many, many other sort of values. Now, taken all together, all these three elements of persuasion are not things that work independently. They all work together. So in any particular piece of media, be that an advertisement, be that a persuasive essay, be that a literary text, you're going to probably be able to find good examples of all of them. Sometimes one will be more prominent than the other, and a lot of times an author might be trying to deliberately emphasize one at a particular time, but there's always going to be the availability of the other ones. And any really effective, persuasive piece of text is going to have all three present, which you guys are going to find both in the text that you analyze for me, as well as in the texts that you guys eventually produce. Keep this video, make sure that you can come back to access it and review it. If you have questions about any of these elements of persuasion, make sure that you contact me. We're going to be using them a lot, obviously in the essays that we're about to write, but also you're going to find that persuasion is one of the major things that dominates the world of Julius Caesar. We'll be seeing a lot of the characters attempting to persuade one another back and forth. You guys will have to be able to analyze how effective they are being, what exactly that is that they're using as they do so.